Story number 1.
It was a quiet morning on February 24th, 2023, until chaos broke out in the Bamfield home. Shouts and screams echoed from the upstairs bedroom, followed by the sound of gunshots. When police arrived, they found a scene that didn't quite make sense. 2 bodies, a knife, and a story that felt off. What really happened that day? How did things spiral so out of control? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered shocking secrets that turned this into a story of betrayal, conspiracy, and murder. In 2003, at the age of 18, Christine enrolled at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut to pursue a degree in nursing. In 2004, during her first year of college, she met Brendan Robert Banfield, and before long the two started dating. Christine graduated in 2007, and the following year, in 2008, Brendan proposed to her. Their engagement lasted nearly 2 years, culminating in their marriage on June 12, 2010. Christine was a devoted nurse who loved her job, often working grueling 16-hour night shifts. Despite the exhausting schedule, she found fulfillment in her work. On social media, she occasionally shared her fitness journey at a local gym, where Brendan would sometimes join her. Friends of the couple noted how Brendan was always supportive, encouraging Christine in her workouts and complimenting her progress. Christine once posted about how happy she felt when Brendan motivated her, especially after he noticed the positive changes her healthy routine brought to her life. Brendan, on the other hand, was more reserved online, rarely sharing personal details. He worked as a federal agent in the tax department, investigating fraud and tax evasion cases. Together, Christine and Brendan built a life that reflected their shared efforts and deep connection. They enjoyed attending football games, hosting parties, taking vacations, and traveling abroad. They were the picture of a typical American couple, meeting young and dreaming of a bright future together. The couple initially lived in New York before relocating to Herndon, Virginia. Their home, valued at over $1 million, was in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. Financially stable, both enjoyed excellent salaries and a comfortable lifestyle. Their jobs sometimes required travel, which meant they were occasionally apart for work. In one social media post, Christine mentioned having to leave their dog at a pet hotel because both she and Brendan were traveling for work simultaneously. In October 2017, Christine, then 32, announced on social media that she was 3 months pregnant. On March 30th, 2018, she gave birth to a baby girl. From then on, Christine's social media posts reflected her joy as a mother, sharing pictures of her family. In 2019, the Banfields decided to join the Culture Care Au Pair program. For those unfamiliar, the program facilitates cultural exchange, allowing au pairs to live with families abroad, care for their children, and study, all while receiving accommodation, meals, and a stipend. In April 2019, Amanda, a young Brazilian woman, joined the family through the au pair program. Over the next 2 years, Amanda developed a close bond with the family. She shared photos of their trips, celebrations, and everyday life, showing a strong relationship with the Banfields. Christine even referred to Amanda as part of the family. Amanda's time with the Banfields ended in 2021, but she extended her stay for 6 months due to global travel restrictions. Encouraged by their positive experience, the Banfields sought another au pair, specifically someone Brazilian. They met Juliana Perez Magalhães, a 23-year-old nurse from São Paulo, Brazil. Juliana arrived in late 2021 after completing the au pair application process. Like Amanda, Juliana developed a good relationship with the family. While not as close as Amanda had been, Her connection with the Banfield seemed strong enough for them to extend her stay for another year. However, everything changed on February 24, 2023. At approximately 7:50 a.m., a brief 911 call was made from Juliana's phone but ended abruptly. 13 minutes later, another call came through, during which Juliana reported that a friend was injured. Moments later, Brendan took the phone and told the dispatcher he had found his wife, Christine, with stab wounds in their upstairs bedroom and had shot a man named Ryan. Police arrived within 10 minutes to find Ryan deceased and Christine gravely injured in the upstairs bedroom. Christine was rushed to a nearby hospital after the incident. Fortunately, the couple's 4-year-old daughter, who was in the house at the time, was unharmed. However, Christine succumbed to her injuries and passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. Brendan was also hospitalized due to a leg injury. Preliminary reports from the police revealed that the deceased man found at the scene was Joseph Ryan, a 38-year-old. According to the initial investigation, Ryan allegedly broke into the Banfield home, attacked Christine with a knife, and was fatally shot by Brendan shortly thereafter. This was all the information made available at the time. After being discharged from the hospital, Brendan refused to speak with the detectives or the media about the events that had unfolded. Juliana, on the other hand, cooperated fully. She provided her account to the police, signing a formal statement. Juliana claimed that on the morning of the incident, she had arrived at the Banfield residence for work and witnessed Joseph Ryan forcefully entering the home. Panicked, she called Brendan, who was not home at the time, and asked for help. Brendan reportedly advised her to stay calm and assured her he would be there within minutes. Juliana stated that she waited outside the house for her safety until Brendan arrived. Once he got there, the two entered the home together and found Christine gravely injured. They also came face to face with Joseph Ryan, who was still inside. According to her account, a physical altercation ensued between Brendan and Ryan, during which Brendan managed to grab a firearm kept in the house and fired multiple shots at Ryan, killing him. Brendan later corroborated Juliana's account, claiming he acted in self-defense. However, one puzzling detail emerged from Juliana's statement. She mentioned arriving at the Banfield home early that morning to start her work. This raised questions, as au pair typically reside in the homes of their host families. It remained unclear where Juliana had been before arriving at the house. For months, the police withheld information about the investigation, opting to keep their findings confidential. Meanwhile, neighbors reported seeing Juliana at the Banfield residence frequently. Though it was uncertain whether she was still living there, she was often seen with the couple's daughter, leading to speculation that she might still be working as her nanny. By August 2023, Juliana posted on social media that she was looking for a nanny position in the area. Given that au pairs are not allowed to seek additional employment while participating in the program, this suggested that Juliana was no longer part of the program at that point. After more than 7 months of investigation, law enforcement pieced together key evidence and forensic data to shed light on the case. According to Juliana's own statements to her family in Brazil, the police concluded that Joseph Ryan had killed Christine due to a disagreement, as the two had allegedly been in a relationship. However, the case took a shocking turn on October 19, 2023, when Juliana was arrested. She was taken by surprise as the police charged her with second-degree murder, alleging that it was she, not Brendan, who had fired the fatal shots at Joseph Ryan. Investigators also concluded that Brendan had not been home at the time of the shooting, contradicting their earlier statements. Juliana was subsequently taken to the Fairfax County Detention Center. Initially, the public rallied behind Juliana, hailing her as a hero who acted in defense of the family that had welcomed her into their home. Many sympathized with Brendan as well, believing he had lied to protect Juliana, knowing her temporary visa status could jeopardize her future in the country. However, police later revealed that there were no signs of forced entry at the Bamfield residence, suggesting that Joseph Ryan may have been let in willingly, potentially by Christine herself. Questions also arose about whether Juliana had known Joseph Ryan prior to the incident. These revelations shifted public opinion dramatically. Supporters began to doubt Juliana's version of events as theories circulated online. The most popular theory suggested that Juliana and Brendan had been romantically involved and had orchestrated the incident to eliminate Christine. Speculation grew that a divorce would have forced Brendan to split his assets with Christine, so he and Juliana allegedly staged an attack, using Joseph Ryan as a scapegoat. Another theory proposed that Brendan and Juliana had been traveling together on the day of the incident and returned home to find Christine and Joseph confronting them. In this scenario, Joseph was believed to be a private investigator hired by Christine to confirm her suspicions about an affair. A violent altercation ensued, resulting in Christine and Joseph's deaths. A third theory speculated that Christine and Joseph had been romantically involved, and that Brendan, upon discovering them together, killed them both in a fit of rage. Juliana, loyal to Brendan, allegedly covered for him, and the two began a relationship afterward. During her first court hearing, Juliana testified that on the morning of the incident, Christine had given her and the 4-year-old daughter tickets to the zoo so she could have some alone time. According to Juliana, Christine had planned to meet Joseph Ryan, whom she had met on a dating site. Juliana claims she had forgotten the child's lunch and returned to the house to retrieve it, only to see an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway and a man, later identified as Joseph Ryan, entering the house. Alarmed, Juliana called Brendan, who instructed her to wait outside until he arrived. When Brendan arrived, they both entered the house together. Juliana admitted to making the initial 911 call, but hanging up quickly, unsure of what to say. Juliana took the Bamfield's young daughter to the basement for safety, while Brendan grabbed his firearm and prepared to confront the situation. Moments later, noises from the upstairs bedroom caught their attention. They rushed to the room and found Joseph Ryan standing over Christine, who was lying naked on the bed, while Joseph, still dressed, held a knife. Brendan pointed his gun at Joseph, demanding he drop the weapon, but Joseph threatened to harm Christine if Brendan didn't lower his gun. What happened next was a chaotic and horrifying series of events. Joseph began stabbing Christine as Brendan fired his gun. Most of the shots missed their mark, failing to incapacitate Joseph, who continued attacking Christine. Desperate, Brendan yelled to Juliana to retrieve another firearm stored in a safe in the bathroom. When Juliana returned, instead of handing the gun to Brendan, she fired a fatal shot into Joseph's heart, ending the attack. The two then called 911 to report what had happened. Juliana's defense relied on this account, arguing that she acted purely in self-defense. However, the prosecution painted an entirely different picture during the hearing. They alleged that Brendan and Juliana had been romantically involved for months and that the entire incident had been premeditated. According to the prosecution, Brendan pretended to leave for work that morning but stayed nearby, waiting for a call from Juliana. The prosecution claimed that Joseph Ryan was lured to the Bamfield home under false pretenses, believing he was meeting Christine for a romantic encounter. Allegedly, either Brendan or Juliana had created a fake profile of Christine on a dating site, communicating with Joseph to arrange the meeting. Friends and family of Christine who later saw these conversations described them as odd, claiming the writing style didn't match Christine's. On the day of the crime, Joseph reportedly arrived at the house and was greeted by Juliana, explaining the lack of forced entry. Shortly after, he was ambushed by Brendan, according to the prosecution's theory. They argued that the couple meticulously planned the scene to eliminate Christine, thus allowing Brendan to avoid dividing his assets in a divorce and to live a wealthy life with Juliana. A witness from a shooting range testified that Brendan and Juliana had visited the facility 2 months before the crime. Additionally, Brendan returned alone a month later to purchase a firearm, the same firearm Juliana used to kill Joseph. Investigators also revealed that both Brendan and Juliana replaced their cell phones just 4 days before the incident, which prosecutors saw as further evidence of premeditation. Photos taken of the Banfield home after Juliana's arrest showed significant changes. The room that had once belonged to Juliana was empty, and her belongings, clothing, makeup, and personal items, had been moved into Brendan's bedroom. All photos of Christine and Brendan with their daughter had been removed and replaced with pictures of Brendan and Juliana, some of which included the child. While Juliana's defense acknowledged the possibility of a relationship between her and Brendan, they insisted it was not serious. They argued that both Brendan and Christine had been unfaithful to each other, casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative of a well-planned conspiracy. Brendan invoked the Fifth Amendment during his testimony, refusing to answer questions that could incriminate him, and provided minimal responses throughout the hearing. The prosecution also brought up Juliana's attempt to obtain a new passport while her original had been confiscated during the investigation. They argued that this suggested an intent to flee the country. Juliana's defense countered, explaining that they had advised her to apply for a new passport as a valid form of identification, emphasizing there was no plan to escape. Despite this, the judge denied Juliana bail, ordering her to remain in custody until her trial. Meanwhile, Brendan was released but remained under investigation. Initially, he claimed responsibility for shooting Joseph Ryan, but after forensic evidence proved Juliana had fired the fatal shot, he altered his account. The Banfield's daughter was placed in the care of relatives as the legal proceedings continued. Months later, on September 16, 2024, police arrested Brendan Banfield, charging him with first-degree murder for the deaths of both Christine and Joseph. Prosecutors allege that Brendan had conspired to kill them at the family's home, using a firearm in the commission of the crime. While the authorities did not disclose specific evidence linking Brendan to the murders, they revealed that he and Juliana had planned a trip to Brazil just days before his arrest. During Brendan's first hearing, it was revealed that his relationship with Juliana began in August 2022, nearly a year after she started working for the family. At the time, Juliana had been in a long-distance relationship with a boyfriend in Brazil. The prosecution presented evidence that, a month before the crime, Brendan and Juliana had traveled together to New York, stayed in a hotel, and attended a show. On the morning of the incident, Brendan claimed he left home at 7:11 a.m. and stopped at a McDonald's for coffee, a routine part of his commute. He said he received a call from Juliana around 7:37 a.m., reporting that an unknown man had entered the house. Brendan said he rushed home, leaving his breakfast unfinished. However, during the hearing, prosecutors played the recording of Juliana's initial 911 call, which lasted only 8 seconds. In the background, Joseph Ryan could be heard groaning in pain before the call abruptly ended. When asked about this, Brendan claimed the dropped call was due to their inability to locate the phone after it fell. He admitted to instructing Juliana to retrieve the second firearm from the bathroom safe as a precaution. However, instead of handing him the gun, Juliana used it to shoot Joseph in the heart. The timeline of events raised significant questions. Authorities noted a 13-minute gap between Juliana's first 911 call and her second. Joseph Ryan was already injured by the time of the first 911 call, raising questions about why it took Brendan and Juliana 13 minutes to make the second call. Authorities believe this time was used to stage the crime scene. According to the prosecutor, Joseph's body was repositioned to make it appear as though he had been actively attacking Christine. Investigators revealed that the knife found at the scene belonged to Joseph Ryan and had been brought by him in a backpack. In conversations with the person he thought was Christine, Joseph had been encouraged to bring the knife due to a shared interest in certain fantasies. The website where Christine and Joseph communicated was geared toward casual encounters with a focus on fetishes involving pain and pleasure. This detail, authorities argued, conveniently supplied Brendan and Juliana with a prop to frame the scene. Paramedics who responded to the incident noted several inconsistencies. Both Christine and Joseph's bodies appeared to have been moved and repositioned. Joseph's arms were crossed and stained with Christine's blood in a way that would not have been possible given the fatal shot he sustained to the chest. Additionally, while paramedics worked to save Christine, Brendan reportedly showed little concern for her condition, asking repeatedly whether Joseph was still alive. Authorities believe this indicated Brendan's fear that Joseph might survive and reveal the truth about what happened. Blood spatter analysis further supported the theory of staging. Reports from forensic investigators, finalized in August 2023, confirmed that both Christine and Joseph had been moved after sustaining their fatal injuries. This evidence, along with text messages and witness statements, began to piece together the chain of events leading up to the crime. Before the incident, Joseph had confided in a friend about his communications with Christine. He mentioned that she claimed her marriage was open and that both she and her husband pursued relationships with others. Based on their online conversations, Joseph shared explicit details, including photos of the items he planned to bring to their encounter: a knife, cuffs, and belts. He also mentioned plans to cut Christine's pajamas with the knife, which matched the discovery of a torn pajama set in the bedroom. However, police found that Joseph had never spoken with Christine over the phone or through video chat. This detail became critical to the case. Authorities suspected that the person behind the profile was either Brendan or Juliana. If Joseph had spoken to Juliana, her distinct Brazilian accent would have raised suspicions. Yet none of Joseph's friends mentioned him bringing up such a detail. Investigators speculated that Brendan might have fabricated a backstory to explain any discrepancies, such as claiming Christine had lived in Brazil for a time, accounting for the accent. Joseph's friends, who were interviewed by police, described him as a peaceful individual and expressed disbelief that he could have harmed Christine. They believed he had been manipulated into the situation, which ultimately led to his death. Between Juliana's arrest on October 19, 2023, and Brendan's arrest on September 16, 2024, the two maintained consistent contact. In a recorded conversation, Juliana questioned Brendan, saying, "I hope you're not staying with me just because you're afraid I'll turn on you." Brendan responded by telling her to be quiet. This exchange, among other pieces of evidence, raised further suspicion of their involvement in the crime. By late October 2024, Juliana agreed to a plea deal to avoid a full trial. She pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and agreed to testify against Brendan at his upcoming trial, scheduled for February 2025. The prosecution stated that Juliana's sentencing would depend heavily on her testimony and the outcome of Brendan's case. During her confession, Juliana revealed how Brendan masterminded the entire plan. Their romantic relationship began in August 2022, roughly a year after Juliana started working for the family. By fall 2023, Brendan expressed his desire to get rid of Christine and began orchestrating the crime. Using a fake profile on an adult dating site that catered to fetish-based fantasies, Brendan posed as Christine and initiated contact with Joseph Ryan. Over time, he lured Joseph into arranging a meeting at the Banfield home, instructing him to bring specific items, including a knife. To make the setup more convincing, Brendan asked Juliana to speak to Joseph via a voice call on Telegram, pretending to be Christine. Juliana confessed that she was reluctant to participate, but ultimately complied. On the day of the incident, Brendan waited nearby after leaving the house under the pretense of heading to work. He instructed Juliana to handle Joseph's arrival and to play along with the charade. Juliana admitted to feeling trapped and fearful, but said Brendan's control over her left her with little choice. Juliana followed the plan and made the calls as instructed. However, Christine's phone went straight to voicemail because Brendan, before leaving that morning, had turned it off and hidden it in a kitchen drawer. Brendan, waiting at a nearby McDonald's, received Juliana's call and pretended to attempt to call Christine, knowing full well it would also go to voicemail. He then returned to the house, picked up Juliana and the couple's daughter, and entered the home through the basement. They left the child there before heading upstairs to the bedroom Brendan shared with Christine. Brendan carried his service weapon, and Juliana had the firearm Brendan had given her earlier that morning. When they entered the bedroom, they found Joseph holding Christine, who was naked. Brendan shouted, "Police!" before shooting Joseph in the head, causing him to fall away from Christine. Juliana then made the first 911 call, during which Joseph could be heard groaning in pain. Following Brendan's instructions, Juliana ended the call prematurely. Afterward, Brendan grabbed the knife Joseph had brought and stabbed Christine multiple times. Meanwhile, the 911 operator attempted to call back, but Juliana did not answer. Then Juliana noticed Joseph was still moving. She fired the fatal shot into his heart, as later confirmed by the medical examiner. Brendan then staged the crime scene, moving Christine and Joseph's bodies closer together to make it appear as though Joseph had attacked Christine. Once the staging was complete, Brendan instructed Juliana to make a second 911 call, in which she reported that an intruder had broken into the Banfield home and attacked Christine. When the police and paramedics arrived, Brendan accompanied Christine to the hospital while Juliana went to the police department with the couple's daughter. The events that followed became the subject of widespread public scrutiny. Juliana's confession left little doubt that the crime was a conspiracy orchestrated by her and Brendan to murder Christine and begin a life together. Brendan's trial is set for February 2025, with Juliana's sentencing scheduled to follow shortly thereafter. Joseph Ryan's mother has avoided interviews to respect the investigation, but made a poignant social media post after Brendan's arrest, stating that living without her only son has been unbearably difficult. She added that her hope for justice is the only thing keeping her going. Both Christine's and Brendan's families have expressed deep shock and sorrow over the events. Christine was laid to rest at Queen of All Saints Cemetery in Suffolk County, New York. Meanwhile, the couple's 6-year-old daughter is reportedly under the care of close relatives. As for Joseph Ryan, no information about his funeral has been made public. The families involved remain haunted by the tragedy, while the nation watches closely for justice to be served.
Story number 2.
It was a normal Saturday morning in Bethesda, Maryland, when the manager of a Lululemon store showed up to open for the day. But the moment she walked inside, she knew something was wrong. The store was a mess, clothes everywhere, mannequins knocked over, and the floor had blood on it. As she stood there in shock, she heard something. a soft moan coming from the back. What she found next would leave everyone speechless. Two employees had been inside the store the night before. Now, one of them was dead, and the other was tied up and hurt. At first, it seemed like a terrible robbery gone wrong. But as police started asking questions, the story began to change. And what really happened that night was far worse than anyone imagined. Jana Murray entered the world on November 22, 1980, in Wichita, Kansas. She was the daughter of David and Phyllis Roslyn Murray. From a young age, Jana stood out for her adventurous spirit. She had a deep love for animals and dancing, and giving back was part of who she was. She spent much of her life volunteering. Her friends and family often described her as someone whose smile could light up any room. Jana also had an undeniable passion for travel. Her goal was to set foot on every continent, and she managed to visit all of them, except Antarctica. For her 30th birthday, she marked the occasion by filming herself bungee jumping, perfectly capturing her thrill-seeking nature. Academically, Jana was a star. Her hard work earned her a scholarship that took her to Madrid, where she spent 2 years studying at St. Louis University. She later completed her Bachelor of Science degree at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. But Jana didn't stop there. She pushed forward and eventually earned dual master's degrees in communication and business administration from Johns Hopkins University. For her master's thesis, she focused on Lululemon Athletica, a premium yoga and fitness apparel brand. Naturally, she pursued a position with the company after graduating, and her drive and business instincts quickly landed her a role. By 2011, Jana was a team leader at the Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland. She was also close to finishing her second master's degree. Outside of work and school, Jana was in a happy relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Fraser Bozel. What she didn't know was that Fraser had begun researching engagement rings. He was preparing to propose. Life was falling into place beautifully for Jana. Her career was thriving, her education nearly complete, and her relationship was stronger than ever. A bright future was just around the corner. But everything changed on March 11, 2011. Jana's promising journey was suddenly cut short by a tragic and unimaginable event. The next morning, on March 12th, Rachel, the manager of the Lululemon store, arrived at the Bethesda location shortly before 8 a.m. to open up. Bethesda was generally considered a quiet, safe area, but when Rachel reached the entrance, she noticed the door wasn't locked. That was her first sign something was off. As she stepped inside, it was immediately clear that something terrible had happened. The store was in disarray. Mannequins were knocked over, clothes were scattered, and more horrifyingly, blood was splattered across the floors, walls, and ceiling. Still trying to make sense of the chaos, Rachel suddenly heard faint moaning. Someone was still inside and in pain. Overwhelmed with panic and fear, she ran out of the store and straight to the neighboring Apple store, where a long line of customers had gathered for the release of the new iPad 2. Among the crowd, one man named Ryan couldn't help but notice how distressed Rachel appeared as she stood outside the Lululemon store. When she explained something was terribly wrong inside, Ryan offered to go in with her and check it out. Inside, Ryan walked toward the back of the store, moving past the chaos. Bloody footprints marked the floor, and the space looked like a disaster zone. As he neared the office area, he stumbled upon something unimaginable. A woman with long blonde hair was lying face down in a pool of blood. Before he could fully process the horror, a soft moan caught his attention. It was coming from the bathroom. Inside, he found another woman, her hands and ankles bound with zip ties, her body bloodied but still alive. It was clear she was injured and in pain, but miraculously, she was breathing. Ryan rushed back to the front of the store and told Rachel to call 911 immediately. First responders arrived quickly and were faced with a gruesome scene. They began the task of identifying the two women. Tragically, the deceased was 30-year-old Jana Murray. The survivor, badly hurt but alive, was identified as Brittany Norwood, a 28-year-old employee who had transferred from a Lululemon store in Georgetown just 6 weeks earlier. Brittany's injuries were extensive. Cuts and bruises covered her legs, arms, chest, face, and torso. Zip ties still restrained her, and both women's pants had been slashed, raising disturbing concerns that the attackers may have assaulted them. Brittany was rushed to the local hospital, visibly shaken and in need of immediate care. Back at the store, investigators began examining the body of Jana Murray. The violence inflicted on her defied belief. Medical examiners would later find 331 wounds on her body, over half of which were concentrated on her chest and face. She had been attacked with at least 6 different tools found scattered throughout the store, most of them likely taken from a store toolbox, items including a hammer, a box cutter, a wrench, and a knife. Around her neck was a ligature, though it wasn't tight enough to suggest strangulation. Still, it was an odd and unsettling detail. Jana's body was transported for an autopsy, while her devastated parents and boyfriend were notified of her death. The autopsy revealed heartbreaking truths. Jana had fought with everything she had. Her body bore over 100 defensive wounds. Ultimately, the fatal blow had struck the back of her neck. There was evidence that she had tried to escape. The blood trail led toward the store's emergency exit. There was even blood on the door handle, along with a key still in the lock, Jana's key. The attack had lasted for roughly 20 minutes. The idea that Jana had endured such agony for so long was almost too much to bear. Detectives urgently needed answers, but they were met with challenges. The Lululemon store had no external security cameras, which meant they had no footage showing who might have entered or exited the store that night. That lack of surveillance was seen as a serious oversight. Investigators turned to the Apple Store's security footage across the street and discovered video from the night before that showed 2 men dressed in dark clothing walking near the store around the time the attack occurred. However, the footage was taken from too far away to make any definitive identification. With no other leads, detectives turned to the only person who might know the truth, Brittany Norwood. Though Brittany was still clearly traumatized, flinching and recoiling from any physical touch, she eventually shared her account of what had happened. According to Brittany, on the evening of March 11, 2011, she and Jana were on the closing shift. Jana had driven to work, while Brittany took public transit. After locking up the store, they went their separate ways. But shortly after arriving at the metro station, Brittany realized she had left her Metro card inside the store. She called another coworker to get Jana's number and then phoned her directly. Despite having nearly reached home, Jana turned back to help Brittany. It was just like her to go out of her way for someone else. At around 10:05 p.m., Jana unlocked the store door with Brittany right behind her. But the moment the door opened, 2 masked men in dark clothing pushed their way inside. One was tall, the other shorter. Both appeared to be white and in their 20s. She said the shorter man attacked her, while the taller one took hold of Jana. They forced the women to the back of the store, threatened them, and told Brittany they knew where she lived. She had utility bills in her purse with her address, along with her ID. Terrified, Brittany believed the men were robbers and hoped they would just take what they wanted and leave. But instead, she claimed the situation spiraled into violence. Both women were physically assaulted and taunted with racial slurs. Brittany said they were violated, and during the chaos, she could hear Jana screaming. Eventually, the screaming stopped. Brittany said that's when she knew Jana was gone. She feared she was next, but then, unexpectedly, the men told her they would spare her life. Why they chose to leave her alive, she didn't know. When Brittany was asked why the attacker spared her, her answer was chilling. They said she was fun to take advantage of. Once the brutal assault ended, the men allegedly tied Brittany up and left her inside one of the store's bathrooms. That's where she was later discovered. The interview was eventually cut short so investigators could focus on gathering forensic evidence, hoping to find DNA that would lead them to the men responsible. Meanwhile, based on Brittany's account, authorities set up surveillance outside the Lululemon store. Not long after, they spotted two men dressed in black, matching Brittany's description, and stopped them for questioning. But this promising lead quickly unraveled. The men were waiters from a nearby restaurant, and they walked that same path every night after their shifts. The black clothing? Part of their work uniform. Digging into surveillance footage from previous nights, police confirmed that these two men regularly passed by the store at that same time, following the exact route. Both had rock-solid alibis for the night of the crime and were cooperative with investigators. They willingly provided their DNA and shoe prints for comparison. Everything was sent for analysis, but it all came back clean. On March 16, 2011, 5 days after the incident, Brittany was brought in again for further questioning. When asked if she knew what kind of car Jana drove, she said she didn't. The interview wrapped up shortly after. But the next day, a surprising twist. Brittany's siblings contacted the police and said she had something else to share. They explained that she was afraid to come forward on her own, fearful that the attackers might return and hurt her if she said too much. So, on March 18th, Brittany sat down with detectives for a third interview. This time she admitted that she actually did know what Jana's car looked like, because the attackers had made her move it. According to Brittany, the men forced her to drive Jana's car away from the store before they assaulted her. They told her she was being watched and threatened to kill her if she tried anything or didn't return right away. While moving the car, she noticed a police officer nearby but didn't approach him, fearing for her life. Yet despite this explanation, the police began to suspect that Brittany wasn't being fully honest. One major inconsistency involved her earlier claims that both she and Jana had been sexually assaulted. Their pants had been sliced, seemingly supporting that story. But 6 days into the investigation, forensic testing told a different tale. The results were shocking. There was no evidence of sexual assault. In fact, the only DNA present at the scene belonged to Jana and Brittany. No trace of any male DNA anywhere. Even the samples from the two waiters didn't match anything at the scene. Investigators turned their attention to another key detail: footprints. Strangely, all the prints were contained inside the store. If the attackers had entered from outside, there would likely have been some kind of trail leading in or out. But there was nothing. That left police with two possible explanations. Either the attackers swapped shoes inside the store, which made little sense, or the attacker never left, because they had never come in from outside. Even more suspicious, the smaller footprints found throughout the scene matched Brittany's shoes. The larger set belonged to a size 14 shoe. At first, this seemed like a potential clue pointing to an unidentified male assailant. But when they matched the print to store inventory, they found the shoes had come from Lululemon's own stockroom. They were store property. This raised a critical question. If two men had ambushed Jana and Brittany, why would they take the time to change into store-brand shoes during a violent crime? It just didn't add up. Meanwhile, employees at the Apple store next door told police something disturbing. Around 10:30 p.m. on the night of the attack, they had heard a loud argument coming from Lululemon. Several staff members, including a security guard named Ricardo, said they distinctly heard two women fighting, one of them pleading, "Talk to me. Please don't do this. What's going on?" The voices were followed by crashing sounds, what sounded like a struggle, and something heavy being dragged across the floor. But no one heard a man's voice. At one point, someone was heard whispering, "God, please help me." Tragically, no one at the Apple Store called the police. They dismissed the commotion as a workplace disagreement, some internal drama. Little did they know that Jana was fighting for her life just a few feet away. With all these discoveries piling up, detectives were growing more and more suspicious of Brittany. As investigators dug deeper into Brittany's background, one particular detail kept popping up, and it was more troubling than they could have imagined. Brittany Norwood had a secret, and it followed her long before she ever stepped foot into the Lululemon store. In college, Brittany had a reputation. Friends, roommates, and even teammates began to notice things disappearing: money, clothes, makeup. When it happened often enough, people started to talk, and eventually, her kleptomaniac tendencies caught up with her. Reports were filed, and as a result, Brittany lost her scholarship and was expelled from school. By 2007, Brittany had relocated to Maryland and started working at a hotel. She quickly rose to a managerial role, but history repeated itself. When co-workers discovered that Brittany had been stealing from them, she was fired. Despite her rocky past, Brittany still had ambitions. She dreamed of becoming a personal trainer and eventually opening her own fitness center. Her job at Lululemon wasn't meant to be permanent. It was supposed to be a stepping stone toward a bigger goal. Jana Murray and Brittany weren't particularly close. They worked side by side, were friendly enough, but there wasn't much beyond that. Nothing suggested there was bad blood between them. So what triggered the horrifying events of March 11th, 2011? That evening, before the store closed, employees went through the standard procedure, a mandatory bag check designed to prevent internal theft. Jana was tasked with inspecting Brittany's bag, and what she found raised a red flag. A pair of Lululemon leggings with the tag still attached sat inside. Jana didn't confront Brittany directly, but she contacted their manager and reported the incident. The manager told Jana she would handle it in the morning. Somehow, Brittany found out. Later that night, after the store had closed and the employees had gone home, Brittany contacted Jana. She claimed she had left her Metro card at the store and needed help retrieving it. Jana, being the kind and helpful person she was, agreed to return. What happened next is believed to have been a confrontation. Brittany possibly begging Jana not to report her, hoping to avoid yet another firing. But when Jana stood firm, refusing to back down, the situation turned volatile. Investigators believe Brittany attacked Jana with store tools, items like a wrench, a hammer, a box cutter. As Jana fought desperately to escape, trying to reason with Brittany, the assault escalated to a level of unimaginable brutality. After taking Jana's life, Brittany moved her car to a different location to buy time and cover her tracks. A witness later reported seeing Brittany in the vehicle, and nearly 90 minutes later, she was still sitting there, possibly formulating the story she would tell next. Brittany returned to the store, put on size 14 shoes found on site, and staged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. She trashed the space, took cash from the registers, and then inflicted minor injuries on herself before zip-tying her own wrists and ankles. She placed herself in the bathroom and waited until morning, when co-workers discovered the horrifying scene. All of it, a chillingly calculated attempt to divert suspicion. Jana lost her life over a pair of stolen leggings. On March 18, 2011, exactly 1 week after the crime, Brittany Norwood was arrested. Prosecutors faced a challenge. They had to prove that this wasn't a spontaneous act of violence, but a premeditated murder. If they succeeded, Brittany would receive life without parole. Her defense team, however, aimed for a lesser charge, second-degree murder, arguing that she had snapped in the heat of the moment. The trial began in October 2011. The lead prosecutor, John McCarthy, painted Brittany as a manipulative woman and a compulsive liar. He laid out overwhelming forensic evidence and highlighted the inconsistencies in her story to prove that Brittany had planned the attack. Meanwhile, the defense admitted Brittany had killed Jana, but argued that it was not pre-planned. They said it was a tragic case of a young woman who panicked and lost control. But the details told a different story. Jana didn't die quickly. She fought hard, left behind a trail of blood, tried to escape, and endured a 20-minute-long attack. She was conscious through most of it. That kind of prolonged violence made it clear this wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. The jury didn't need long to reach a decision. After just an hour of deliberation, they found Brittany Norwood guilty of first-degree murder. In January 2012, Brittany was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called the murder cold-blooded, premeditated, and merciless, and condemned the calculated steps Brittany took after the killing. He also criticized the Apple Store employees for their failure to act when they heard Jana pleading for help, calling it an example of callous indifference. In 2015, Brittany's final appeal was denied. She remains imprisoned at the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. This case will be remembered not only for its cruelty, but also for the heartbreaking irony. Jana was murdered by someone she tried to help. All she did was tell the truth, and for that, she paid the ultimate price.
Story number 3.
On the afternoon of June 4th, 2008, in a quiet suburb of Mesa, Arizona, 30-year-old Travis Alexander stepped into the shower of his home, unaware that it would be the last thing he ever did. Just minutes earlier, he had been laughing, posing for photos, completely at ease. But behind the lens was someone he once trusted, someone whose calm exterior hid a storm of rage, jealousy, and obsession. What happened in the moments that followed would spark one of the most shocking murder investigations in modern American history. A trail of blood, a broken camera, and a story that kept changing. On June 9, 2008, in Mesa, Arizona, a group of friends became increasingly concerned about 30-year-old Travis Alexander. No one had heard from him in 5 days, and it was out of character for the outgoing, sociable young man to go completely silent. After several unanswered calls and messages since June 4th, his friends decided to check on him in person. When they arrived at his home, everything on the outside appeared normal. They rang the doorbell multiple times but got no response. Before leaving, one of them remembered that a mutual friend knew the garage door code. After explaining the situation, that friend agreed to come by and help. As soon as they entered through the garage, a foul smell hit them. At first, they thought it could be from Travis's dog, who greeted them upon entry. But as they made their way upstairs, the odor intensified. Something was very wrong. They knocked on the door to Travis's room, but there was no answer. In the adjacent room lived one of Travis's housemates, Zach Billings. When they knocked on his door, he emerged, surprised. Zach hadn't seen Travis in a week and believed he was away on a trip to Cancun with a woman he had recently been dating. Zach had a spare key to Travis's bedroom and opened the door. Inside, they found a large pool of blood soaking into the carpet, leading to the bathroom. There, in the shower, they discovered Travis's body, curled in the fetal position. He had suffered 29 stab wounds, a deep slash across his throat that severed his carotid artery, jugular vein, and trachea, and a gunshot wound above his left eyebrow. His fingers and toes had darkened from livor mortis, indicating he had been dead for several days. They immediately called 911. During the call, they mentioned that Travis had an ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias, who had shown troubling behavior in the past. When authorities arrived at the scene, there were no signs of forced entry, and the house was undisturbed, suggesting the killer was someone Travis knew and trusted. Blood spatter lined the hallway and bathroom walls. A bloody left-hand palm print was found on the wall, and the bathroom sink was streaked with blood. Clumps of long, dark hair, clearly from a woman, were found in the shower and on the floor. Police also discovered a digital camera inside the washing machine, soaked and seemingly destroyed. Forensic technicians were able to recover several images from its memory card. The photos, taken on June 4th, showed Travis and Jodi Arias in intimate poses. The final image, time-stamped at 5:29 p.m., captured Travis alive in the shower, followed by accidental shots believed to have been taken moments after the attack began. Investigators interviewed everyone close to Travis, including his roommates. They admitted noticing a strange smell, but dismissed it as dirty dishes or trash. DNA samples were collected from all who had contact with the victim. Soon, Jodi Arias' name came up repeatedly. Travis had ended their relationship months earlier, citing her obsessive and controlling behavior. She had slashed his tires and constantly checked his phone. While police prepared to contact her, Jodi herself unexpectedly reached out to authorities. She claimed to be devastated and offered to help, stating the last time she saw Travis was in April. Born July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California, Jodi Arias was the daughter of William and Sandy Arias. She had 3 siblings and grew up in what appeared to be a calm household. However, Jodi later alleged she was physically abused by her parents starting at age 7. From a young age, she had a deep interest in photography and pursued it throughout her teenage years. In the fall of 2001, Jodi Arias began working as a waitress at a restaurant in Carmel, California. 2 years later, in 2003, she started dating the manager, Daryl Brewer, who was nearly twice her age. Jodi was 21 and Daryl was 40. Their relationship started off strong. Jodi was affectionate and dependable, and the two shared a deep connection filled with passion and stability. By May 2005, they bought a home together in Palm Desert, California, agreeing to split the mortgage. In early 2006, Jodi took a new job with Prepaid Legal Services, a company offering affordable legal help and organizing seminars. Just 1 month into the role, she became interested in the Mormon faith and started attending church. Her newfound religious commitment quickly created tension in her relationship with Daryl. She told him she no longer wanted to be physically intimate, stating she wished to save herself for marriage as her church teachings encouraged. Despite this declaration, she soon underwent breast augmentation surgery and abruptly ended the relationship. In September 2006, Jodi met 29-year-old Travis Alexander at a company conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. The attraction was instant. Travis, a successful motivational speaker, had grown up in a chaotic environment. The son of drug-addicted parents, he was one of 8 siblings. After his parents divorced, he was raised by his paternal grandmother, a devout Mormon, and he adopted the church's teachings as his own. Despite facing immense adversity throughout his childhood and teenage years, Travis used his story to inspire others. He worked hard to build a stable life and become a symbol of personal growth. After the conference, Travis and Jodi exchanged numbers, though he lived in Arizona and she in California. Just a week later, they met again. and that night they became physically intimate. What followed was a period of constant communication: texts, calls, emails, and daily contact. On November 26, 2006, Jody was baptized into the Mormon Church, hoping to become more compatible with Travis. 3 months later, they made their relationship official, and Jody relocated to Mesa, Arizona to be closer to him. But soon after, things took a dark turn. Jody discovered messages from another woman on Travis's phone and accused him of being unfaithful. Her behavior shifted dramatically. She became increasingly jealous, possessive, and emotionally unstable. She frequently checked his phone, questioned his whereabouts, and lashed out in anger. Travis, once optimistic about the relationship, began to feel trapped. He confided in friends that Jody was pulling him away from his faith, and that he was beginning to question whether she was the kind of person he wanted in his life. The relationship officially ended in June 2007 after just 4 months. However, they continued having secret sexual encounters, often traveling together for business events. Jody believed they still had a future. Travis, meanwhile, began dating other women. He suspected Jody had vandalized his car, slashing his tires on 2 occasions, and that she had sent anonymous threatening emails to both him and his new partner. Friends recalled him saying that she had once broken into his house by crawling through the doggy door. Despite these red flags, their physical relationship continued. They exchanged intimate photographs, and Jody remained fixated on him. By mid-2008, Travis had told friends that Jody had hacked into his social media accounts and accessed his bank information. He said he felt haunted by her and didn't know how to break free. Their final break came when Travis invited another woman, Mimi Hall, to accompany him to a planned trip to Cancun on June 15, 2008. He had initially intended to go with Jody, but changed his plans at the last minute. When Jody learned she had been replaced, she was enraged. On May 28, 2008, a burglary was reported at the home of Jody's grandparents in Eureka, California, where she was living at the time. Among the stolen items was a handgun. On the morning of June 2nd, Jody left her grandparents' house at 5:39 a.m. She traveled to Redding, California, where she rented a car at 8:04 a.m. Offered a red vehicle, she declined and requested a more discreet color. She also brought gasoline containers with her, an unusual detail that would later reveal her attempt to conceal her travel route. Jody told friends and contacts that she was headed to Utah to meet with a colleague named Ryan Burns, who also worked with prepaid legal services. Her true destination, however, was Mesa, Arizona, an 11-hour drive from her starting point. The gas canisters allowed her to refuel without stopping at public gas stations, thereby avoiding security cameras and leaving no digital payment trail. Between 1 a.m. and 3 p.m. on June 3, 2008, Jody Arias called Travis Alexander 4 times. He never picked up. Eventually, Travis returned her calls, first with an 18-minute conversation, followed by another lasting 41 minutes. What they spoke about remains unknown, but what happened next would change everything. On June 4th, Arias showed up in Salt Lake City to meet Ryan Burns, a colleague she had planned to see. Burns immediately noticed something was off. Jody's signature, long blonde hair, was dyed a darker shade, and her hands were marked with cuts. When asked about the injuries, she casually explained they were from a broken glass at work. Aside from her altered appearance, she seemed cheerful, even more upbeat than usual. That same day, Travis failed to show up for a scheduled conference call. His absence raised concern among friends, especially since he was usually punctual and professional. Days passed without any word from him. Then, on June 9th, his body was discovered in his Mesa, Arizona home in a gruesome scene that left his friends and the community in shock. On June 17th, Jody voluntarily gave her DNA and fingerprints to investigators. At that time, she wasn't seen as a primary suspect. Her cooperation and calm demeanor didn't match the erratic, possessive woman Travis's friends had described, but that changed 2 days later. Forensic technicians managed to retrieve deleted images from Travis's damaged digital camera. The photos, dated June 4th, showed Jody and Travis in intimate poses. The final images, taken just before his death, captured Travis in the shower, alive. One of the last shots showed his bloodied body on the bathroom floor, and another appeared to show Jody's foot. When police contacted Jody again, she denied ever being in Mesa. She claimed she had been in Salt Lake City at the time of the murder, and that Ryan Burns could confirm it. Burns did back up her alibi, except for noting the odd hair color and the cuts on her hands. Lab results soon revealed something much more damning. A bloody palm print at the crime scene contained DNA from both Jody and Travis. By July 15, 2008, investigators had enough evidence to bring her in for formal questioning. Detective Esteban Flores led the interrogation. He challenged her timeline, pointing out that her trip from California to Utah had an unexplained 18-hour gap. Cell phone records showed her device had been turned off for a long period, likely to avoid leaving a digital trail. Even when confronted with the forensic evidence, blood, fingerprints, and photographs, Jody denied everything. She insisted the images had been altered and that she had no knowledge of what happened. Then, she broke into tears. What followed stunned everyone watching the surveillance footage. When left alone in the interrogation room, Jody began behaving erratically, kneeling on the floor, then standing on her head, later singing calmly to herself, and finally talking aloud as if someone were in the room. When informed she would be photographed for booking, she even asked if she could apply makeup and smiled, asking, "How do I look?" before the camera flashed. In the days that followed, her story changed. First, she admitted she had been with Travis the night of his death. But now she introduced a new tale. Two masked intruders, one male, one female, had broken into the house, murdered Travis, and let her live after threatening to kill her family if she spoke out. She claimed to have hidden in a closet during the attack and fled after the killers left. Still, her tears and trembling voice couldn't mask the inconsistencies in her story. Eventually, Jody shifted her narrative once again. This time, she confessed to killing Travis, but claimed it was an act of self-defense. She alleged he had attacked her in a fit of rage, and she fought back. She couldn't recall the details, she said, only that she found herself driving later with blood on her hands and no clear memory of what had occurred. After committing the murder of Travis Alexander, Jody Arias fled across the desert. Along the way, she stopped her vehicle, changed clothes, and discarded the blood-stained garments in a dumpster. Then she continued driving toward her destination. Not long after, she appeared in front of the media, confidently proclaiming her innocence. She told reporters that the evidence would exonerate her and that no jury would ever convict her because, as she stated, she was not guilty. Despite carefully crafting her alibi, meticulously planning the route, and attempting to erase any trace of her presence, the reality was far more damning than she anticipated. As investigators reconstructed the events of June 4th, a chilling sequence emerged. That afternoon, Jody and Travis had been intimate, as they had many times before, and took several photos together. Afterward, Travis stepped into the shower. As he did, Jody retrieved a knife she had hidden beneath her clothes. Under the pretense of continuing the photo session, she entered the bathroom. In the final image, Travis is seen sitting in the shower, moments before the first stab. She attacked him with brutal force. Defensive wounds on his hands showed he tried to fight back. Bleeding heavily, he stumbled out of the shower and reached the sink. There, he coughed up blood, staining the counter. He tried to call for help but couldn't. As he attempted to escape down the hallway, Jody followed and stabbed him repeatedly in the back. She eventually pulled his head back and slit his throat, leaving a massive pool of blood on the carpet, later discovered by his friends. In an attempt to drag his body back to the bathroom, Jody pressed a bloody hand against the wall for support, a crucial piece of evidence, a palm print containing both her and Travis's DNA. During the struggle, the camera they'd used earlier fell and accidentally snapped a blurry image of Jody's foot next to Travis's blood-soaked body. After seeing him convulsing from the trauma, she fired a final shot into his forehead. The entire attack took roughly 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Jodi Arias's trial began on January 2, 2013. Her defense claimed self-defense. She admitted to killing Travis but alleged that he had attacked her after she dropped his camera. According to her, he became enraged, struck her, and broke her finger. In fear, she said, she ran to his closet, grabbed a gun she claimed belonged to him, and fired in desperation. When he kept coming, she claimed she stabbed him, but had no memory of how or when. Prosecutors argued otherwise. The evidence, they said, pointed to a premeditated and calculated murder. Witness testimony confirmed she had borrowed gas canisters from her ex-boyfriend Daryl Brewer, suggesting she intended to make a long drive without stopping, thereby avoiding security cameras and receipts. Audio recordings and explicit messages revealed a complicated and toxic sexual relationship between Travis and Jodi. While she painted herself as a victim of verbal and physical abuse, prosecutors highlighted her obsessive behavior and history of manipulation. At one point, she even accused Travis of being a pedophile, an unsubstantiated claim that further muddied the emotional tone of the trial. To bolster her defense, Jodi's lawyers argued that she had suffered memory loss due to extreme psychological trauma. A clinical psychologist testified that Arias may have experienced an acute stress response, triggering a fight or flight reaction that disrupted her ability to form memories. He suggested she exhibited symptoms of anxiety stemming from long-term trauma. However, the prosecution's psychologist provided a contrasting diagnosis: borderline personality disorder. He described Jodi as emotionally unstable, manipulative, and prone to intense, erratic behavior. During the trial, Arias spent 18 days on the witness stand, often contradicting her previous statements and displaying theatrical emotion. After 15 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder on May 23, 2013. During the sentencing phase, however, jurors couldn't agree on whether she should receive the death penalty. The process moved to a second jury, which convened on October 20, 2014. That jury also failed to reach a unanimous decision, voting 11-1 in favor of death. With the death penalty no longer an option, the final decision rested with the judge. On April 13, 2015, Jodi Arias was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was later transferred to Perryville Prison in Goodyear, Arizona, where she continues to serve her sentence. Since her incarceration, she has been moved multiple times within the Arizona prison system. Despite her many attempts to rewrite the narrative, the evidence and testimony ultimately told the real story, one of obsession, control, and a brutal crime that shocked the nation.
Story number 4.
It was still dark on the morning of January 19, 2002, in the quiet town of Santomera, Spain. Inside a small house, two little boys were asleep in bed next to their mother. Everything seemed calm until something terrible happened. By sunrise, police were at the house, and the peaceful neighborhood was in shock. No one could believe what had taken place overnight. What really happened inside that home? And how did a mother end up at the center of such a heartbreaking story? Francisca Gonzalez was born in 1966 in the small town of Santomera, located in Murcia, Spain. She grew up in a deeply religious community, in a home with her parents, two sisters, and a brother. Life in Santomera revolved around Catholic traditions and conservative values, but behind the pious exterior, not everything was serene in her household. Reports suggest that her father struggled with alcoholism, which likely cast a shadow over her formative years. Francisca completed her basic education and became known for her attention to appearance from a young age. This focus on her image intensified after a comment from her brother about her weight. According to her mother, Francisca had several romantic relationships during her teenage years, including one with a wealthy foreigner, though she was never drawn to material comfort alone. At 18, she met José Ruiz Nicola, known as Pepe, and the two quickly became romantically involved. After nearly 2 years of dating, Francisca became pregnant, and the couple entered a civil marriage in 1987. Their first child, José Carlos, was born soon after. Francisca would later recount that Pepe had a history of soliciting sex workers for group encounters, a lifestyle he attempted to leave behind during their courtship. However, after their marriage, those tendencies resurfaced. He introduced her to a world of partner swapping and outings to clubs catering to similar interests. In 1996, 9 years after their civil ceremony, the couple solemnized their marriage in the Catholic Church with a large celebration. That same year, their second son, Francisco Miguel, was born, followed by a third, Adrian, in 1998. While their family expanded, so too did the turmoil in their home. Pepe's job as an international truck driver meant he was away for long periods, leaving Francisca to manage the household alone. His prolonged absences stirred deep jealousy in Francisca. She began tracking his movements, sometimes even in disguise and by taxi. Their arguments escalated, both over the phone and in person, sometimes erupting into physical altercations. Francisca later described enduring psychological abuse. Feeling abandoned, she turned to compulsive shopping and invested heavily in clothes and lingerie, hoping to reignite her husband's interest despite her deep resentment. Her emotional instability worsened. Francisca developed a dependence on alcohol and drugs, substances that, according to later revelations, were frequently present in the household. Between 1990 and 1999, medical records documented her struggles with anxiety, insomnia, and anemia. Amid her breakdown, her children bore the brunt. Francisca became harsh and physically violent, far from the nurturing figure they needed. By 2002, the oldest son, José Carlos, then 14, had taken on the role of caregiver for his younger brothers. He was responsible not just for supervising them, but also for their basic needs, like meals and hygiene. The home environment had become deeply unstable, yet no one could foresee the horror about to unfold. Francisca, convinced her husband was still unfaithful, followed him to a business park where she believed she saw him with another woman. This incident, some say, was the final fracture in an already crumbling marriage. When Pepe announced he was leaving for a trucking job in France, Francisca issued a chilling threat. She would hurt him more than he had ever hurt her. He left, but their fights continued by phone. Back home, she sank deeper into substance abuse. On Friday, January 18th, 2002, she stayed in bed with flu symptoms, but later took her children to the park. That night, as Jose Carlos watched over the household, the younger boys slept in the marital bed with their mother. In the early hours of Saturday, January 19th, the silence of the house was shattered by the screams of the younger children. Jose Carlos awoke but stayed in bed, assuming it was another episode of maternal punishment. Violence had become such a norm that he didn't suspect the danger. The morning brought three differing accounts of what occurred. One version states that Jose Carlos tried to wake his brothers and found them lifeless. Terrified, he ran to alert nearby relatives while Francisca called the police. Another narrative claims he awoke to unusual sounds and discovered the gruesome scene himself. A third suggests that Francisca woke him, alleging a robbery had occurred and urging him to seek help. When authorities arrived, the sight was horrifying. The two boys lay in the master bed, bearing visible signs of violence. Bruises and pressure marks indicated asphyxiation. Investigators immediately focused on understanding what happened during the night and who was responsible. Francisca initially said that a group of Ecuadorian men had broken into the home through the balcony window with intent to rob. She claimed to have attempted to defend her children using a can of pepper spray, which the intruders wrestled from her before rendering her unconscious. This, she said, explained her inability to protect her sons. One of the officers later shared in an interview that although Francisca appeared agitated, she did not seem overtaken by grief. More concerning, however, was her attempt to direct the officers' attention toward very specific clues, raising suspicions that she was trying to steer the investigation. While Francisca and her surviving son received psychological support from Murcia's social services, the police began collecting statements from extended family and neighbors. As soon as Francisca was physically stable, she was taken to the Forensic Institute for a medical evaluation. The examination aimed to assess the alleged effects of the paralyzing gas she claimed had been used on her, as well as the scratches found on her wrists and face. Initial reports revealed that during her emergency call, Francisca repeatedly cried that her children had been taken from her. Her husband, who was abroad at the time, immediately began his journey back to Santomera upon hearing the devastating news. In her earliest testimony, Francisca alleged that intruders had not only killed her children, but also stolen several pieces of jewelry. She claimed that in the days leading up to the attack, unfamiliar foreign men had been loitering near the house. She even said she had changed the door lock days earlier after finding it tampered with. Among the theories she offered to detectives was that the attack could have been a message, an act of retribution tied to her husband's alleged involvement in drug trafficking. But her version of events soon began to unravel. As investigators pressed her for details, contradictions emerged. At first, she said 2 men broke in. Later, it was just one. She claimed the scratches on her face came from a struggle, yet she also insisted the assailants wore gloves. The inconsistencies multiplied. After 12 hours of questioning, suspicion had shifted squarely onto Francisca herself. Statements from her son Jose Carlos and from neighbors further weakened her claims. They described her as emotionally unstable and prone to violent outbursts. Then came the autopsy results. The time of death for the 2 boys was placed between 2 and 3 a.m., hours before the time Francisca had claimed the supposed burglary took place. Further forensic analysis added more damning evidence. Tissue found beneath the children's fingernails did not match either of the boys. It was later confirmed through DNA to belong to their mother. Additionally, Francisca's own medical exam contradicted her story. She showed none of the physical symptoms typically associated with exposure to a paralyzing agent. No throat or eye irritation, no respiratory issues. And then, another blow to her narrative. During a search of the house, officers discovered the supposedly stolen jewelry hidden in couch cushions. A blonde wig and 9,000 euros in cash were also recovered from the property, suggesting premeditation. Investigators recalled an important detail shared by Jose Carlos during the initial interviews. On the evening before the tragedy, Francisca had asked him to go out and buy batteries for his Walkman. Seemingly innocent, this request was later interpreted as an attempt to ensure the teenager's room was filled with music, blocking out any sounds from the crime she was about to commit. It also surfaced that Francisca had requested her housekeeper come by the next morning, a move interpreted by police as a calculated effort to clean up potential evidence. In her written declaration, Francisca claimed that during the early morning hours, she had been awake exchanging text messages with her husband. Around sunrise, she said, she heard glass shattering. Opening her bedroom door, she claimed to have encountered a gloved man whom she attempted to fend off with a canister of spray and a knife hidden beneath the bed. The man, according to her, overpowered her and sprayed her unconscious. When she came to, her children were dead and some jewelry was missing. But investigators quickly determined her story didn't hold up. They reconstructed the timeline and concluded it was physically impossible for everything she described to have occurred in the brief time frame she outlined. Despite growing suspicion, authorities did not arrest her immediately. They allowed her to attend the funeral where she appeared heartbroken and composed, standing beside her estranged husband, both consumed by grief. Only one day after the funeral, the police arrested Francisca. The woman who had just wept for her children was now being taken into custody as the prime suspect in their deaths. Pepe and Jose Carlos watched in disbelief as she was placed into the back of a police vehicle, just 48 hours after burying the boys. It didn't take long for the facade to collapse. Under pressure during a formal interrogation, Francisca broke down and admitted to killing her two youngest sons. But even as she confessed, she sought to deflect full responsibility. Her defense hinged on the claim that a potent mix of alcohol, cocaine, and tranquilizers had clouded her judgment in the hours leading up to the tragedy. She described waking after 7 a.m., dazed from the substances, and discovering her children lifeless beside her. According to her statement, she wandered through the house to confirm whether an intruder had entered. Finding no signs of forced entry, she concluded, horrifyingly, that she must have been the one responsible. Still, moments after this admission, she contradicted herself again, asserting that she had genuinely believed at first that strangers had broken into the house, a belief she blamed on the hallucinatory effects of the drugs. The timeline reconstructed by authorities was chilling. Around 2 a.m., Francisca is believed to have entered her bedroom. She first attacked her middle child, using a mobile phone charger cable to strangle him. The boy fought back, leaving scratch marks on her body. Despite his resistance, she overpowered him. Then she turned to the youngest and repeated the act. As the legal process advanced, her defense team proposed that she be transferred to a psychiatric facility. The court approved the request. Evaluated by forensic psychiatrists, Francisca was described as cold, manipulative, immature, and egocentric. She craved attention, they wrote, and demonstrated emotional instability, controlling behavior and aggressive tendencies. They noted paranoid and narcissistic personality traits and remarked on her lack of interest in maintaining social or familial harmony. Still, Francisca continued to frame herself as a victim. In her first statement to the judge, She blamed her actions on years of psychological torment. She described 2001 as a year of unrelenting emotional deterioration, citing humiliation, threats, and verbal abuse from her husband. She claimed that Pepe had pushed her into partner swapping clubs and maintained a year-long affair that ended just before the murders. Her substance abuse, she argued, was rooted in trauma. She also asserted that their family had been in danger due to Pepe's alleged involvement in drug trafficking. She recounted an incident where a stranger pointed a gun at Pepe's head, claiming this terrifying encounter had prompted her to prepare for a possible escape. It was, she explained, the reason she purchased a blonde wig and hid 9,000 euros in cash, the same items later seized by police. These were not tools for a crime, she insisted, but a contingency plan. Francisca denied any premeditation. She claimed that if she had intended to flee, she would have done so. The idea of staging a robbery only came to her when she awoke to find her sons dead, she said, not before. She insisted she never meant to harm her kids, and reiterated that she had no memory of her actions that night due to a heavy mix of 5 grams of cocaine, sleeping pills, and several glasses of whiskey. She denied that the murders were intended to hurt her husband, saying there had been far more effective opportunities to do so if that had been her goal. As for Pepe, he maintained a measured position. He acknowledged the infidelity, admitted he had spent too much time away from home because of work, and blamed himself for not noticing the signs earlier. He recounted how Francisca began smelling of alcohol and making small weekly withdrawals from their shared account. Despite their estrangement, he claimed she had loved him obsessively and insisted she would never have harmed the children had she not been under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Pepe even revealed he had once considered seeking psychiatric help for her, a decision he now regretted not following through on. In the face of unimaginable loss, guilt, and confusion, he found himself trying to make sense of the woman he thought he knew, and the mother who had become a killer. Then, another layer of complexity emerged. According to judicial sources cited by local newspapers, Francisca was allegedly involved in a romantic relationship with a businessman from Murcia. This man, whose identity was never revealed, was described as someone she was deeply in love with, a claim that stood in stark contrast to her obsessive surveillance of her husband. Investigators found multiple phone calls between Francisco and this mystery man in the days leading up to the killings, including one placed just minutes after the murders. While the content of the call was never made public, some sources speculated that the extramarital affair may have fueled a desire for revenge. Francisca denied everything. She claimed the alleged lover never existed and accused her husband of fabricating stories to portray her as unstable and discredit her accusations of abuse. Amid swirling rumors and unresolved questions, Francisca remained in pre-trial detention until her court proceedings began in October 2003. In the opening hearing, she reiterated that she had no recollection of killing her children, blaming the state of intoxication she was in that night. She said that upon finding them unresponsive, she had attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She described how her pajamas were soaked in sweat and removed them in panic. Once again, she blamed Pepe, claiming he had threatened and psychologically tormented her. She even denied having confessed the crime to police, saying she had been too intoxicated to remember anything clearly, even whether she had been alone in the house that night. She portrayed herself as a responsible mother and insisted that she no longer used drugs in prison, but confessed she was not mentally or emotionally fit to be released. During the trial, her eldest son, Jose Carlos, gave difficult testimony. He recalled waking up that night to the sound of his younger brothers shouting that they couldn't breathe. He didn't intervene. He assumed, tragically, that it was another episode of their mother's violence, a routine they had sadly grown used to. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously. They argued that Francisca had staged the crime scene to resemble a robbery and highlighted the forensic findings that proved she had been in control of her actions. The defense did not dispute the deaths, but insisted that drug use had rendered her incapable of understanding what she was doing. The prosecution dismantled this argument, presenting psychiatric evaluations stating that Francisca had been fully aware of her actions and the fatal consequences. The verdict was unanimous. Francisca Gonzalez, then 37, was found guilty of the double murder. The jury concluded that she had planned the crime in advance and that her use of drugs and alcohol did not impair her judgment. Psychiatric experts testified that she did not suffer from any psychological disorders that would absolve her of responsibility. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive 20-year prison terms, 40 years total. The court also ordered her to pay 200,000 euros in compensation to Pepe and 40,000 euros to Jose Carlos. Francisca began her sentence at the Sangonera prison in Murcia. Her cold demeanor and lack of visible emotion left a chilling impression. Initially met with hostility, she eventually earned a degree of respect from fellow inmates for her discipline and literacy. She offered to write legal documents for other prisoners in exchange for money, turning her skills into a prison economy. Despite the sentence, Francisca maintained her physical appearance. She was always well kept, polished, and meticulous about hygiene. She divorced Pepe shortly after sentencing and reportedly entered into relationships with at least 3 men, also incarcerated. Over the years, she was transferred between different facilities, but continued to be described as a model inmate. In 2016, she was granted a temporary weekend release. Then, in July 2020, nearly 17 years after her conviction, Francisca was granted a form of semi-freedom that allowed her to serve the remainder of her sentence outside prison under supervision. But freedom didn't last. In April 2022, authorities revoked her status after discovering she had not been staying at the residence she provided. She was sent back to prison. Later, it emerged that she had also violated release terms by consuming drugs. Though some privileges were later reinstated, for a time she was again barred from any temporary leave. Jose Carlos continued living in the same house where the murders occurred. By 2022, he had a family of his own, his wife and 2 children living in the very home where he lost his siblings. The property had once been offered for sale, but no one wanted to buy it, even at a fraction of its value. It remained in the family. As for Pepe, he reportedly left Spain for a time after the tragedy, but eventually returned. He has kept a low profile. Francisca remains incarcerated. Rumors circulated that she had married her defense attorney, but these were denied. Her story remains one of the most disturbing family crimes in Spanish history, not only for the brutality of the act, but also for her cold rationalizations, shifting narratives, and disturbing composure. For many, it is incomprehensible that a mother could plan and carry out such a crime. Whether it was revenge, desperation, or delusion, only Francisca knows the real motive. And whether she truly doesn't remember or simply chooses not to, remains a question that will likely never be answered.
Story number 5.
It was still dark in Memphis, Tennessee, the streets almost silent except for the steady rhythm of a runner's footsteps. At 4 a.m., most of the city was asleep, but Eliza Fletcher was already on her daily route, preparing for another long run. She had done this countless times before. Same road, same distance, same hour. But this morning, September 2nd, 2022, something was different. Surveillance cameras captured her passing by, dressed in her usual athletic gear, unaware of what was about to unfold. A dark vehicle slowed nearby, lingering in the shadows. Moments later, the jogger who had started her day with discipline and determination was gone. Her phone and water bottle were left behind. A pair of sandals, not hers, lay scattered on the ground. By sunrise, the search for Eliza Fletcher had begun, and Memphis would soon find itself gripped by one of the most haunting cases in recent memory. Eliza Fletcher was 34 years old, a devoted kindergarten teacher and the mother of 2 little boys. Her life seemed full of purpose and love. She met her husband Richard at church, and in 2014, they exchanged vows in that very same place of worship where their story had begun. Eliza came from a well-known Memphis family. She was the heiress to Orgill Inc., one of the largest hardware distribution companies in the country. But the business world wasn't where her heart was. Her true calling had always been teaching. She began her career at Promise Academy in Nashville, where she not only taught kindergarten, but also coached young students in athletics. Later, she moved to St. Mary's Episcopal School in Memphis, considered one of the best private schools for girls in Tennessee. Her warmth and energy shone through in the classroom, and it wasn't unusual for her to fill the room with songs and smiles. Her students adored her, and she adored them just the same. Beyond teaching, running was another great passion in Eliza's life. She trained with dedication and skill, finishing 20th among all women in the St. Jude Marathon, a result that qualified her to compete in the prestigious Boston Marathon. Running was part of her daily routine. Every morning she logged around 8 miles, often along the same route at the same time, with an unmatched discipline that impressed everyone who knew her. On September 2, 2022, Eliza began her day long before dawn. At 4 a.m., while the city still slept, she laced up her shoes and set out for her usual run near the University of Memphis campus. For her, this ritual was not just about fitness, it was a way of centering herself. But this morning would not end as the others had. By 6:45 a.m., a passing cyclist noticed something unusual along the path: a water bottle, a cell phone, and a pair of Champion sandals left on the ground. Concerned, he turned back, not realizing the significance of what he had just found. Within the hour, everything became clearer when Eliza's husband Richard reported her missing. She had not returned home from her jog. The items were quickly confirmed to be hers, except for the sandals. No one recognized them. Detectives moved fast, pulling surveillance footage from cameras in the area. The images showed Eliza running her regular route, dressed in a pink top and bluish-purple shorts. Then the scene took a dark turn. A black SUV had been circling the neighborhood for nearly half an hour. Suddenly, it pulled over. As Eliza passed, a man leapt out, rushed at her, and forced her into the vehicle. The SUV sat still for 4 long minutes before speeding away into the darkness. The recording was grainy, the early morning light too dim to catch many details, but investigators noted one clue. The car's front light appeared damaged. A partial license plate was also visible. The sandals left at the scene were collected for DNA testing. From the skies and on the ground, police began a massive search across Memphis. Neighbors woke up to helicopters overhead, officers knocking on doors, and urgent pleas for help. Eliza Fletcher, a beloved teacher, a wife, a daughter, and a mother, was now missing. As news of Eliza Fletcher's disappearance spread across Memphis, her family stepped forward in heartbreak and desperation. On behalf of her husband Richie, her 2 young children, her mother Adele, her father Beasley, her brother Gil, and the rest of the Fletcher family, a public statement was released. They expressed deep gratitude for the overwhelming support from the community, for the prayers and concern that poured in from all directions. Eliza, they said, had touched countless lives, and it was clear from the response how deeply she was loved. They also thanked the Memphis Police Department, the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and every agency working tirelessly to bring her home. The family stressed that their greatest wish was for Eliza to be found safe, and they announced a reward for any information that could lead to her return. A hotline was shared with the public, urging anyone who knew anything to come forward. Meanwhile, investigators set up a mobile command center in the area where Eliza had been abducted. Surveillance footage was released, showing her during her morning run, dressed in a pink athletic top and purple shorts. Police also circulated images of the SUV used in her abduction. Members of Eliza's extended family also spoke out. The city attorney, Jennifer Sink, who is Eliza's aunt, shared on social media that Eliza was her niece and pleaded with the community to stay alert and call the authorities with any leads. Local runners expressed their fears as well, urging women in particular to run in pairs or groups, a sobering reminder of the dangers faced during early morning or late night exercise. The family's offer of a $50,000 reward underscored the urgency. In the days that followed, investigators searched both Eliza and Richard's home, seizing items such as a laptop and the family vehicle, a standard part of a thorough investigation. Despite official statements suggesting this was likely an isolated and random attack, speculation spread online. Social media chatter accused her husband Richard of being involved, some even suggesting financial motives tied to Eliza's inheritance. For a grieving family already living a nightmare, these rumors were both painful and cruel. But within a matter of days, those doubts began to crumble. Investigators had found a dark SUV parked in a lot. Its headlight damage matched what had been seen on the surveillance footage. Forensic testing of the sandals left behind at the crime scene provided an even stronger lead. DNA results came back quickly, giving authorities a name they already knew well, one that had been in their system for nearly 30 years. The suspect was identified as 38-year-old Cleotha Abston, who also sometimes went by the surname Henderson. His criminal record stretched back to when he was only 11 years old. Most striking was his history of kidnapping. He had only been out of prison for a short time after serving 20 years behind bars. Between 1995 and 2000, he had been arrested at least 16 times for charges including theft, aggravated assault, unlawful possession of a weapon, and even the rape of an unidentified male victim when he was just 14. The kidnapping that had sent him to prison involved attorney Kemper Duran. In May of 2000, Duran was forced into the back of a car at gunpoint by a teenage Abston and his accomplice, Marquette. It was only by sheer luck and the attention of a passerby that Duran managed to escape. He later said he believed he would have been killed that night if he hadn't gotten away. While serving time in prison, records showed that Cleotha Abston had continued a disturbing pattern of behavior. Over the years, he was accused of 19 separate incidents of indecent exposure while incarcerated, a record that painted a troubling picture of his character. After his arrest in connection with Eliza Fletcher's disappearance, Abston was charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and tampering with evidence. But despite being in custody, he refused to cooperate with investigators. The search for Eliza pressed on, each day weighing heavily on her devastated family and on a community that clung to hope she might still be found alive. Authorities confirmed that Abston's bond had been set at $500,000. By this point, it was only the third day since Eliza had vanished, and the search had already expanded into a multi-agency operation. Alongside Memphis Police and the Shelby County Sheriff's Office, the FBI joined the investigation. Agents began piecing together evidence, cross-referencing Abstin's phone data with locations connected to Eliza. On September 5th, 4 days after she was last seen, investigators made a heartbreaking discovery. At 5:07 p.m., Memphis police and their law enforcement partners located human remains behind a vacant duplex about 7 miles from where Eliza had been abducted. Forensic examination confirmed the worst fears. The body was Eliza Fletcher. She had been found in a wooded area behind the abandoned property. The condition of her remains revealed the brutality of the crime. She had suffered a gunshot wound to the head, fractures to her jaw, and injuries to her legs. Her running shorts were later recovered in a discarded bag nearby. The toxicology report also showed fentanyl in her system, though investigators could not determine how long it had been present or whether it had played any role. Friends and family insisted Eliza never used drugs, and police believe she had been assaulted during the time Abstin's vehicle was parked at the crime scene. Digital evidence placed Abstin's phone at the exact location where Eliza had been taken, and later in the area where her body was recovered. Witnesses also recalled seeing him in suspicious circumstances. Neighbors described how he had cleaned the interior of his SUV with strong floor cleaner, and his brother Mario noticed him washing clothes in a sink only hours after the abduction. With mounting evidence, the charges escalated. In addition to kidnapping and tampering, Abstin was now indicted for first-degree murder. Further charges included identity theft, theft of property under $1,000, and fraudulent use of a credit card. His brother Mario, though not implicated in Eliza's death, was arrested separately on serious drug and weapons offenses, possession with intent to distribute fentanyl and heroin, along with possession of a firearm during the commission of a dangerous felony. The case sent shockwaves through Memphis. What had started as one woman's morning run became a tragedy that shook the city's sense of safety to its core. Families were fearful, runners were unsettled, and the outcry reached far beyond Tennessee. Just 1 week later, grief turned into tribute. Hundreds of people gathered in Memphis for an event called Let's Finish Eliza's Run. Participants followed the very route she had set out to run that September morning, honoring her memory, her spirit, and her light. For many, it was a way of reclaiming both the streets and the community's strength, even in the face of profound loss. On the morning of Let's Finish Eliza's Run, hundreds gathered before sunrise at Central Avenue in South Goodlet. At 4 a.m., the same time Eliza would have begun her run, the crowd set off together. The route was 8.2 miles, the distance she had planned to cover that day. Runners, walkers, and families came to honor her life, showing solidarity and strength in the face of tragedy. Even as the community united, the legal process against Cleotha Abstin pressed forward. Despite overwhelming evidence, Abstin entered a plea of not guilty. His trial was initially scheduled for February 2025, and prosecutors quickly made it clear they would be seeking the death penalty. But the case only deepened. Abstin was charged in another separate crime, the aggravated rape and kidnapping of a young woman named Alicia Franklin. In 2021, Abstin had held Alicia at gunpoint and assaulted her. She had bravely reported the crime, but due to severe delays in processing her sexual assault kit, the DNA match to Abstin was not entered into the national database until September 5, 2022, 3 days after Eliza was abducted. By then, it was far too late. Alicia filed a lawsuit against the city of Memphis and its police department, arguing that if her case had been properly handled, Abston would have been behind bars and Eliza Fletcher would still be alive. Her lawyer condemned the system's failure, saying, "They knew who it was. They did nothing." And as a result, Eliza winds up murdered. In 2023, a Memphis jury delivered its verdict in Alicia's case. Abston was found guilty of aggravated rape, aggravated kidnapping, and unlawful possession of a firearm. The judge sentenced him to 80 years in prison for those crimes. As this conviction was handed down, Abston's defense team made a decision in Eliza's case. At the end of 2024, they advised him there was no chance of success in trial. The evidence was overwhelming. In a surprising turn, Abston changed his plea to guilty on all charges connected to the kidnapping and murder of Eliza Fletcher. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion in court, sitting expressionless as he had at every hearing. Eliza's family issued a powerful written statement. "We have no idea what happened to you to turn you into someone so filled with a desire to hurt people. Whatever it was, it does not excuse or explain what you have done. You have changed our lives forever, and nothing will ever be the same. You murdered Eliza, even though she did nothing to deserve it. She did not hurt you. In fact, she would have been the first to help you if you needed it." The district attorney confirmed that Abston had given up his right to appeal. There would be no lengthy legal battles, no decades of delays. He would never be released from prison. He would die behind bars. In the aftermath of Eliza's murder, Tennessee lawmakers took action. A new law required the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation to release quarterly reports on sexual assault kit testing times to prevent delays like the one that kept Abston free. The murder of Eliza Fletcher became a chilling reminder of what happens when cracks in the system allow dangerous offenders to slip through. With his long record of violent crimes, many believed Abston had no intention of stopping. Eliza's family remembered her for the light she brought to everyone around her. They said her smile radiated happiness, comfort, and energy. She was a devoted wife, a loving mother, a cherished daughter, a sister, a teacher, and a friend. Her school families, her colleagues, her church, and her community all spoke of her kindness, her compassion, and her unwavering faith. She meant so many things to so many people, and without her, the world feels just a little less bright.